decades, the American car was defined by something like this, the Cadillac Fleetwood. It is enormous, at nearly 6 meters long, with an equally gigantic 7-litre V8 engine. With proportions like this, you can imagine, yes, it is very spacious, luxuriously appointed. But with its soft suspension, going around corners was something that you did really slowly, if in fact at all, which is probably why the Americans built such beautifully straight roads. But then in 1964, along came a car that would change the face of motoring in America forever.
The original Mustang became an overnight sensation. Its record as the world's fastest selling car is well documented, but the figures remain impressive. 1 million units were sold after just 18 months in production. Things started going pear-shaped very quickly though, and by the time the second generation came around, the car had become almost unrecognizable as a Mustang. To make matters worse, increasingly stringent emissions legislation had all but tamed the galloping horse.
In fact, at some point in its illustrious 50-year history, the Mustang came very close to being another American land yacht. Close, but not quite.
The sixth generation represents a return to form, literally. It possesses classic Mustang hallmarks, like the impassably long bonnet, while the slanted 3-strip tail lamps make it instantly recognizable, even at night. Would the Mustang deliver on the promise of more athletic on-road performance, hinted at by its exterior design? On the face of it, things did not bode well.
My name's Marius Roberts and I'm driving a 2.3-litre Ecoboost Ford Mustang. I know, it's a confession. I had to just get it out there right in the beginning. Please don't judge me. I actually chose this car on purpose. You know why? Everyone always thinks of Mustang and the heritage and they think big block V8s, and that's obviously what they're most famous for. But when the brand started back in '64, it was little 6-cylinder engines that they were running. Now the 2.3 EcoBoost, 4-cylinder, how can that be a pucker Mustang? But if I never told you that's what I was driving, you'd never have known. And that's where Ford have done a really fantastic job from a styling perspective, because whether you're in the big boy or you're in the junior, it still has the same amount of presence and macho status on the road. Great job. And think about it, all the manufacturers do that. Mercedes-Benz, you can't afford the AMG, but you want the AMG look, you buy the AMG line. This obviously comes kitted out like that at the fixed price. I want to talk about the drive though, because we know that Mustangs in the past have been notoriously bad at handling anything that's got a corner. The Americans, flat road specialists, the Germans have the corners. They've done a great job with this, and I think the main reason is because they've now got an active rear suspension. An independent one works really well and it brings the car to life. This 2.3 EcoBoost actually has too much grip. We're running 255s at the back. There's no ways this car is ever going to break out. It is not as precise as the Germans, I'll give it that. There's still a bit of unsettling and wallowing, but it is way more dynamic from a driving perspective, so I really enjoyed that. But I think for the average driver out there today who has always aspired to own a Mustang but probably hasn't spent enough time driving powerful rear-wheel drive cars, this is going to be the Mustang for most of the people out there, because you're going to look good, it goes really quickly. 233 kilowatts, 434 newton meters is plenty of shove. So you're not going to feel disappointed or shortchanged when it comes to the traffic light. The problem though is this: every traffic light I've pulled up to, everybody's like, rev it, we want to hear this thing. And there is no soundtrack, and that is disappointing, because I've driven in little 2-litre turbos that have a great soundtrack. You can hear the induction of that turbo. This, for me, even though they're piping sounds through the speakers, unless you're driving it really, really hard, there's no sound, and that was the biggest disappointment. Another thing I didn't like is the interior. I just expected so much more when you're paying 700,000 Rand for this or 900,000 for the top spec. The Americans just don't have that attention to detail. It's irritating. It's hard Tupperware city, hard plastics everywhere, and even the little switches are, it's meant to look like chrome, but it's that cheap plastic chrome which, put a ring on, it's going to scratch. I was really disappointed. Would have loved the Recaro seats in it as well. They're very comfortable, nice to cruise in, but when you are driving spiritedly, you just don't have that support that you'd like. A couple of irritating positions as well. We're in the 6-speed auto, but you can also get in the 6-speed manual. Good thing we didn't have the manual, because the cup holders sit in a position where the only thing you're going to do on a quick change is change bottles. You're not going to change any gears. They've got all the ambient lighting. You can make your dashboard red, green, purple, pink, you name it. But yet their switches are different color, and I hate that. For me, all the colors in the car should be the same. Little finicky things, but when you're paying that amount of money, people are going to expect a little bit more. A bit more about the drive. So you've got a switch that can change driving modes. So you put it into your comfort, normal mode. It's got Sport Plus, it's got track, and it's got a wet weather setting. You put it into track mode, and obviously it then limits the traction, which is really cool from a driving perspective. You can also change the weight of the steering. It's got a sporty feel, a normal feel. For me, a bit of a gimmick. The Mustang doesn't quite have the steering feel that I'd like, but then again, it turns, it holds its line, it's really responsive from a driving perspective. But when you are pushing on, it tends to want to go into understeer mode, which is great from a driver safety perspective at the end of the day. But this really, I would have loved to have taken on a track to really get to appreciate how much improvement they've done from a driving perspective. But we weren't allowed to take it onto a track. Now, I know it's the first car that's going out into the press fleet, maybe that's why, or maybe it's because the Mustang really is a boulevard cruiser, and that is what sets it apart. It's not as good as the Germans, but it is streets ahead of the Germans when it comes to street cred, hot looks, and turning heads. It's a cracker. The biggest problem for the Mustang is expectation. There is so much hype around this car coming to market that it's like that blockbuster movie. You go in there with an unrealistic expectation. What I can tell you is they have done a great job in turning this into a driver's car. It's a massive improvement from previous generations. They've done a good job. The interior for me was a little disappointing. Hard plastics, cheap switches, and the sound of this 2.3 litre Ecoboost engine, I think they could have done a better job on. Let me hear the turbo working, I want to hear the spooling. This is not a BMW 3 Series. You're not going to get into this car and feel like you are immediately part of the car and fully engaged in it. But that is not a bad thing, because one thing this Mustang does have that a 3 Series doesn't have is character and presence.